Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. So welcome to our Positive Alternatives to Suspension webinar. It started. My name is Mike Meeks, and I am currently the training manager for Boys Town National Training. I've been with Boys Town for 15 years and have experience at pretty much all levels of school environments in teaching and behavior. And I am with my friend and former coworker and co-author of this book.
Hi, and I'm Kathy DeSalvo. I was for 27 years working here at Boys Town, and for 20 years of that, I was the principal of the middle school. And now I presently am the supervisor for multi-tiered systems of support in Omaha Public Schools. Of course, using many of these same principles that we're going to be talking about today in my present role. So I'm very happy to be back here next to Mike. Very comfortable working with an old colleague.
Outstanding. So before we get started with our webinar today, we want to take a moment to talk to you about our organization. For those of you who are less familiar with us, Boys Town started in 1917 by Father Edward J. Flanagan, and our mission is to change the way America cares for children, families, and communities by providing and promoting a continuum of care that instills Boys Town values to strengthen mind, body, and spirit. We carry out that mission through the delivery of proven social and emotionally based behavior model that supports children, families, communities, and schools, and we work hard to provide specific strategies to fulfill the need for multi-tiered interventions for schools and the students they serve. And the interventions that we provide are research supported. Years of research has gone into making sure the strategies and support we offer are effective, and this research is ongoing. We are industry leaders in child and family services and remain committed to offering best practice to schools, children, families, and the communities that we support. So for nearly 100 years, Boys Town has worked to strengthen communities as we support children and families seeking healing from past trauma, relational challenges, and mental health concerns. Boys Town provides a range of services to meet children and families where they are at and serve them in the greatest capacity possible. Boys Town also works hard to empower schools to effectively deal with the ever-increasing challenges that present themselves each day, and our research-driven and supported education model provides school and programs with a safe, positive, and proactive approach to teaching pro-social behaviors. It provides multi-tiered supports for students with variable needs while increasing the consistency and effectiveness of staff.
So that was a great introduction. I get to talk about really what we're going to talk about today. And so we're doing the primary mission of a school system is to educate students in environments where they feel safe, nurtured, and valued. And to achieve this goal, school systems adopt discipline policies that outline codes of conduct and expected behaviors for students. And a large part of these discipline policies include using the most severe consequences available, suspensions, both in school and out of school, and expulsion. These are common practices, continue to be in schools, and their aim is to reduce unacceptable behavioral issues in students, but we'll give you some studies to see if they do or not.
Yeah. The
term suspension often refers to the denial of school attendance for 10 days or fewer and can be used both in school, excluded from class, or out of school, being removed from the building itself. Expulsion refers to the complete removal of a student from school for the remainder of the school year that may or may not include educational services in an alternative placement. According to the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, in the 2011-12 school year, 3.5 million students earned an in-school suspension, 1.9 earned out of school, and 1.5 million students earned multiple out-of-school suspensions. 130,000 students were expelled out of the 49 million students enrolled in the United States.
Those numbers are frightening.
Right, because they're not They're not accessing academic instruction at any time during those.
Absolutely.
In addition, African American students were 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students, and students with disabilities were twice as likely to be out of school suspended. The utilization of zero-tolerance policies and suspension as a primary deterrent for school-related behavioral problems has led to an increase in school dropouts, a decrease in academic achievement, and a decrease in students having the skills necessary to enter the workforce. There is little research currently on alternative to suspension programs as an effective intervention to reduce school-wide discipline problems. Actually, the majority of current research focuses on the use of zero-tolerance policies and suspension as an ineffective intervention to reduce behavioral concerns. These zero-tolerance policies have led to increasing concerns with disproportionate numbers of minority and students with disabilities earning suspensions, an increase in school dropout rates, and academic failure. So we know what doesn't work.
Absolutely, and it sounds like zero-tolerance policies are ineffective, to say the least, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So the term zero-tolerance was initially adopted in the United States in the 80s and 90s due to the increased concern with school violence. However, school districts began expanding the term zero-tolerance to include a wide range of behavior infractions, including fighting, tardiness, failure to complete homework, even things simple like wearing hats in school. So the passing of the Gun-Free School Act in 1994 by the Clinton administration as a reaction to the Columbine tragedy put a mandated 1 calendar year expulsion for possession of any weapon on school grounds. However, since the implementation of this act, there have been many controversies and lawsuits associated with this law due to the overinterpretation, such as students being suspended for bringing toy guns to school, and there was even a case of a 10-year-old girl who brought a knife to school that her mother had put in her lunchbox to cut an apple for her lunch. So the implementation of these policies with broad definitions of what constitutes zero tolerance has led to an increase in the number of suspensions for students across the country for primarily nonviolent behaviors such as tardiness, insubordination, and also disrespect.
Mm-hmm. And in addition, these nonviolent suspensions primarily represent minority students who are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students, and students with disabilities who are twice as likely to be suspended as a student without disabilities. So the initial intention of statewide suspension policies to reduce violence and deal with only the most severe discipline issues has led to disproportionality and exclusion of students who need the most behavioral support. Moreover, these policies may be ineffective in eliminating or reducing the problem behaviors they were designed to stop, and may in fact increase behavior in students with disabilities due to the interruption of behavioral and academic services associated with the suspension. So somebody who doesn't come to school, oh, we're going to suspend them, they'll learn from that. No, I think being at home may be a reinforcement, and there's no opportunity for that student to learn replacement behaviors.
Absolutely, and those students with disabilities that we're referring to, who are in the highest need of support academically and behaviorally, are being excluded from those support services.
Right. So in recent studies, students who were suspended are twice as likely to earn a repeat suspension within 3 months and are 2.2 times more likely to be incarcerated in the future compared to non-suspended students. And what do you call that?
So what you're saying is that
right.
The research points to these policies are not necessarily working, and in fact increase suspensions with the possibility of creating students that get incarcerated because of the likelihood they'll be increasing behavior when they're out and about. So this only represents this not only represents a current problem, but potential future issues that could result in students engaging in serious future offenses due to the overuse of suspensions in school. Suspension is intended to deter students from repeat misbehavior. However, in many cases, it can have the opposite effect. And I want to repeat that. It can absolutely have the opposite effect and instead becomes a positive reinforcement by giving students the day off of school or more than one day and the ability to participate in activities with little adult supervision, because oftentimes, mom and dad have to work. Mm-hmm. So if a student's home, what are they doing? Kind of hanging out. If the consequence is not a deterrent and works as a motivator, then the behavior will likely repeat, as well as increase the number of suspensions, and I think that research is supporting that. In addition, students who are suspended have time to interact with other antisocial peers because parents are able to monitor the activity of their children, which can increase based on the length of suspension. Mm-hmm. So suspensions also affect students' academic achievement, which we've talked about already. In a recent study, groups of students, both suspended and non-suspended, were followed for 2 years, so a longitudinal study. The suspended students were 5 grade levels behind at the end of the study.
Yeah, I think there's also, I know there's been a study done in Omaha where police were looking at where a preponderance of petty crimes are happening, house break-ins and things like that, and they're happening during school hours. School day. Where these kids are being unsupervised if they are suspended, and they're up to maybe creative but not necessarily behaviorally appropriate behavior at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay. This represents a substantial effect that suspension can have on overall academic growth. National averages for students who are frequently suspended include students with disabilities are at or below the 25th percentile in general academic functioning. In a meta-analysis, suspension practices of suspension practices by Noltmeyer and Ward, 2015, they found that urban and low-income schools use suspension at significantly higher rates of other schools. And moreover, these schools represent the highest gap in academic achievement nationally. This ongoing and increasing gap in support for academic achievement has been proven to lead to an increase in school dropouts. Students who experience suspension are 10 times more likely to drop out of school than other students. Due to the social, academic, and fiscal cost of suspension, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that seeking an alternative to suspension whenever possible.
So suspensions cost school districts time related to meetings, hearings, and testimony with no educational benefit. This could be time spent working with the student, teacher, consultants, and families. When schools do choose to use in-school suspension as an alternative, it is often a holding tank, and I think, we've experienced this, kind of across the country, with little behavioral academic support provided, which is ineffective in reducing that problem behavior. Schools should focus on alternatives to suspension that focus on both behavioral change for the student and the school, as well as providing an element of academic support. One way that schools can increase behavioral support for students is to create professional development opportunities for teachers on alternative ways to handle behavior, and additional training for school administrators and social workers on how to teach social skills and bully prevention to reduce instances of disrespect resulting in suspension.
And that's good, because sometimes that just insubordination, talking back to a teacher, might get you bounced for a couple of days, and that it seems like if we could teach to that behavior, it would help.
Absolutely.
So we have this process that we propose.
We do.
And we work together on this book so that we could really kind of explore this for ourselves and see if it worked. So overall, the research shows that that traditional zero-tolerance policies and suspension practices are ineffective, and nationally have led to an increase in behaviors as well as a decrease in academic performance. So schools need alternative practices to dealing with student behavior that involves more behavior teaching and proactive measures to help students with behavior. In the absence of a school culture built on behavior management and proactive measures for dealing with behavior, suspension tends to be a respite for schools and teachers to disengage from the student with behavior problems. And we really know that sometimes they're used to give the teacher a break, or the teachers a break. But it really doesn't benefit the student, and so we have to always revisit that focus.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that at the very beginning. The school system's main goal is to educate the child.
Right. An alternative to suspension program can provide the school or district with the support necessary to problem solve ongoing behavior, teach students pro-social behaviors, keep up with academic rigor, and serve as a deterrent for future misbehavior.
So if students are able to return to school better prepared both academically and behaviorally, there will likely be a decrease in the number of suspensions earned and an increase in positive behavior exhibited by the students. So if we can teach skills and help them keep up academically, they're less likely to continue to want to leave school. So the PASS program, or PAS, was developed in 2009 in response to local need for an alternative program and to address the lack of effectiveness that was reported by school administration using traditional approaches, i.e. suspensions and expulsions. The core of our PASS program utilizes decades of research and practice within the schools and the residential treatment programs here at Boys Town. So one of the main goals of the PASS program is to increase student use of appropriate behavior to achieve social and academic success, while also retaining safety for all students and staff. And I think that's another important key too, is that we absolutely believe that, you know, suspension and expulsion is a consequence in your tool bag, but we want to make sure it's utilized for the most severe consequences when safety is actually at stake, not necessarily some of the nonviolent things. So a hallmark of the program is that it's founded on evidence-based approach to modify student behavior through a respectful environment where professional support is provided and appropriate social skills are taught. And that's one of the big keys. We find that many of our students, especially students that maybe have a disability, have skill deficits, and we want to make sure that we provide them with teaching so they can achieve that. So for every student in the program, an individualized treatment plan is developed that involves experiential learning of social skills with a skill-based criteria for returning to school.
Right, and then additionally, the program aims to decrease the possibility of benefits of being suspended from school and target social skill and performance deficits for the skills needed for everyday living. You want to talk about deficits or just motivation to use the appropriate behavior, but either way, we're going to teach them alternatives to the behavior they chose to use in the classroom so that they have more skills in their toolbox and they don't have to go to that insubordination spot that
Absolutely.
They typically go to.
And like you said, instead of going home, we provide an added benefit of a deterrent by teaching them skills. Who wants to talk to an adult all day long?
And any possible benefit to being out of school during a period of suspension will be removed because you're going to keep the students in a program with high expectations and low tolerances for misbehavior.
Absolutely.
So you're going to just be with them and you're going to encourage them through the day and you're going to expect them to do well. Students in the program process negative events through reflective essays that increase their understanding of the event and the consequences earned, and skills specific to the referral concerns are taught.
I think that's an important point right there. We want to make sure that skills that we teach are intentional.
And they're attached to what happened that got them into the PASS program.
Targeted.
And so skills, I lost my place. Skills specific to referral concerns are taught, yes, and that gives the students the tools to be successful in the future. Well, like in one school district that's nearby, the PASS program has been operating for approximately 3 years and has served more than 200 students. And the school has reported an overall decrease in the need for alternative and traditional suspensions since the institution of the PASS program. Kids just learn and don't want to do that again. The program has allowed students to remain in their classrooms and has decreased the need for out-of-school or alternative suspension methods. the data shows a 23% reduction in the total number of days suspended over a 3-year trial. And the number of students who earned repeat suspension was reduced by 43%. Yep, they don't want to go back. The number of students suspended verified as needing special ed services was reduced by 78%.
I think that's a huge statistic right there, and that's important. The kids that are of the highest need, they got the support necessary, and it was a reduction in the number of suspensions by 78%.
Right. In addition, the number of minority students suspended was reduced by 40%, and these results indicate that students benefited from the skill teaching and interventions provided by the PASS program.
So,
you want to talk about what's in the book?
I do. So we have a book that outlines the Positive Alternative Suspension Program, and this is really a starting point. It's a starting point to help you to be able to create a program in your own school, improve in-school suspension, decrease out-of-school suspension, and show a teaching environment or create a program outside of your school. But at the core of the PASS program is the view that behavior is something that can be taught. Teaching students socially appropriate skills can help them replace inappropriate behavior and make better choices in school, and I think we've outlined that. The book offers some background on the benefits of teaching social skills to youth and procedures for setting up your very own positive alternative suspension classroom. A checklist is also provided to assist with implementation efforts and to understand what is needed to help with success in your own program. The book represents a series of behavioral vignettes that frequently result in suspension to guide you toward replacement skills that will likely help with recurring suspensions. So we give you sample vignettes of the most frequently suspended behaviors and provide you with just an outline, a starting point again, on what skills might help in those specific situations. The main goal of the book is to help you look at behavior objectively through that objective lens and be intentional about your teaching rather than the emotional lens, and look for alternative ways to teach skills to students. The recommended skills and steps are included at the back of the book and can be printed from a CD that's also included. Worksheets and skill work is helpful when supervisors are working with more than one student, because you may have more than one student in your suspension kind of program. A series of written activities can stimulate critical thinking for students. The book has samples of completed worksheets to help create criteria for student completion, and a really important part that I want everybody to hear is that this is not just a book of worksheets. You should absolutely avoid using packets of materials or busy work and expect students to work quietly for long periods of time. There's really no connection to behavior and outcome when you do that. Instead, what we suggest is the written assignments are intended to help stimulate conversation about the misbehavior and the skills needed to avoid it in the future. Some students may find writing difficult and try to avoid the task, and we see this as a reason for suspension sometimes. So in that case, you can work one-on-one with a student to help them or her get started. The prospect of frequent positive interactions with a caring adult can improve the possibility of students being open to practicing alternative behaviors in the future, and I think that's one of the strongest ways for you to connect skills and teach skills is actually having conversations and practicing those skills with your students.
And when you're processing verbally what they've written, you value what they've written.
Yep.
You see their point of view. You can see flaws in their thinking, and you can challenge that. So it is good to have some writing from them because it gives them a chance to sort through that in their view and then have you respond to it. So I think the best thing about it is that we help the students process the writing they do, that it's not something they do and then we ball it up and throw it away and say, now here's your next assignment.
Or stick it in some file somewhere.
Right. So I think that you need to make sure that you value the work that they've done and use it as a jumping off point for your discussion.
Absolutely, and have high expectations with what they're producing, what they're writing. The program data would show that it's extremely effective for those students who absolutely need it, have skill deficits, and also students that have performance deficits. By using the suggested activities in the book and maintaining a calm, skill-focused demeanor, you and your school can help make the difficult suspension situation one that is beneficial for the student and reduce the likelihood of additional suspensions. And I think that is where we are at in our country today, is just the high number of suspensions, disproportionality. We are in absolute need of being able to find a way to reduce those. And I feel like this is a great starting point to that.
And there is a criticism. Probably somebody's going, well, that sounds too nice. I mean, you're being much, you might be too reinforcing for them. They might seek you out even more. We have a lovely example of you processing with sodas.
Oh, yeah.
And I can talk to you a little bit about what that is. Sodas are, S stands for situation, O stands for options, and then disadvantages, advantages, and then solutions. And so we ask the student to do this, but you'll have a sample of Mike working through it with the student, and you'll see that kind of deliberateness is important for her.
And I will say, just from experience, working with students at that level, this was by far one of my most favorite tools to utilize, because it really does stimulate a whole lot of conversation. Yeah.
Okay, so what happened was I was just getting on my phone to check the time in her class, because I can't even see the clock in her classroom, and she yelled at me because, I've been on my phone in the past, I'll admit it, but she thinks, she's always out to get me in trouble. I don't even do anything. I was just checking the time, and she thinks that I was, texting somebody or something, and so when she started yelling at me, she's always out to get me in trouble, so I just walked out of the classroom because I wasn't going to yell at her. I wasn't going to put up with that.
Okay. So let's talk about that situation of you having your phone out and making the choice to walk out of class. So we're going to do that in a way that helps us problem solve the situation by looking at the advantages and disadvantages to several options, and that's called a SOTAS. Okay? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I have a SOTAS worksheet that I have for you right there. So what I want you to do on the first part is to describe the situation in your own words. So as I understand it, the situation was you had your phone out, you were looking for the time to see how long you had, the teacher asked you to put the phone away, you didn't put your phone away, she continued to interact with you, in your words, she was yelling, and then you made the decision to walk out of class because you felt like she always is out to get you. Does that sound about right?
Pretty much.
Okay. So what I want you to do is just write out that situation of choosing to walk out of class because the teacher asked you to put away your phone. Okay, so that's the situation.
All right, so that you have the student really just repeat what you just said. You reworded things so that the situation was, or the antecedent behavior was, the teacher made a request or gave an instruction.
Yeah.
And that puts it in so that she can put it objectively. This is all the teacher did at this point. And that helps kind of objectify it and take a little bit of the emotion out of it for her.
Also, I think it's important, and you'll see it throughout this video, of reframing some of the
He reworded what she said.
Pushback and the attitude. Reframing some of that is important, but again, we want to hear their own words.
All right.
So now, Keely, for every situation we run across, we have options. We always have options, right? Mm-hmm. We have good options, we have different options, and we have options that we chose. So what the next part of this SOTAS worksheet is that we're going to identify 3 options for that specific situation. One of those options should definitely be what you chose, which was walk out of class when the teacher asked you to put away your phone. So we have 3 options. So option 1, what I want you to go ahead and write in that box is walking out of class, because that is definitely an option that you had. Now what I need your help identifying are 2 other options that you could have chose instead of walking out of class when the teacher asked you to put away your phone.
I think that one thing I could have done is just dropped it and done what she said.
Okay, dropped it like on the ground or where? Where could
Just
you have
like put my phone away and then just said, okay, whatever, and just move on.
Okay, so that's option 2. So put away your phone.
Again, you helped her fix her language. I could have just dropped it, and then you said, drop it, and then she said, put away my phone. And so I thought that was really good because you're asking her to be more objective in her word choice and really take a look just calmly at options that she could have done.
And due to time, we've, cut the video a little bit, but we would go through 3 specific options. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if everybody out there noticed, but you should always pick one of the options needs to be the behavior that they did in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's important to have it just there so we can.
It honors it as a choice that she made.
It is absolutely a choice.
Mm-hmm. And you need to say, well, this choice had this. Okay, well, I'm going to slide ahead to what I would do next. So you can go ahead with the next part of this.
Now, if you'll flip the page over. What we're going to do now is look at the advantages and disadvantages of each of our options, okay? So the first thing we're going to look at are the advantages, all right? So what do you think are the advantages to option 1, which was walking out of class? What are the good things that came out of that?
I didn't have to listen to her yell at me.
You didn't have to listen to the teacher anymore? Absolutely. Now, hypothetically, if we would have chose option 2, which is putting away your phone, what do you think of the advantages to that situation could have been?
I wouldn't have been here right now and gotten suspension.
You wouldn't have earned a suspension, and you would have still been in school, not spending 3 days here.
Right, and I was like, 3 days? She has to be 3 days for walking out of the class. But it might have been because she had repeated concerns.
Repeated concerns over time,
right.
Yeah.
I do like it that now she's really exploring the repercussions of the choices that she's made. You stay very deliberate, you're very calm, very respectful of her, but you're not, she wouldn't die to come back to the office.
No.
Because it's still very businesslike and you're making her think and work throughout this.
That's one of my favorite comments to say whenever you're dealing with behavior. Is just be real business casual. I'm not overly emotional. I'm not downplaying anything. It's just fact. It is what it is.
All right, nice work. So now, again, with any situation that we come across, there are advantages and disadvantages of those choices. So we talked about all the advantages to our options. Now we're going to talk about our disadvantages. Now, thinking about option 1, which was, remind me one more time, what was our first option?
Me just walking out of the classroom.
Just walking out of the classroom. So what are the disadvantages to that? We identified the advantage was you didn't have to listen to the teacher anymore. But what's the disadvantage to that situation?
It would just get me in even more trouble.
Get you in even more trouble? Absolutely. Because, right, the situation would show you got in quite a bit of trouble for walking out of class. And this, I know this is not the first time that you chose to do that, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a disadvantage to you're going to get in much more trouble by walking out of class.
What I liked too was that at some point you could see that she's never really thought these kinds of things through before, and really having that deliberate step-by-step looking at, what are the repercussions of my choices. It's offering her a lot more insight into how she responds to things and reacts to things. And
students that are impulsive or emotional or have, go from 0 to 100, they often don't see other options. Whereas you and I as adults, we do a SOTAs in our head whenever we come across a situation instantaneously. This really helps to expand that skill for kids who maybe don't have that skill.
Mm-hmm.
After finishing this out, our last part of this problem-solving process is the solution, right? So thinking about your three options: to walk out of class, to put your phone away, or to ask the teacher or a classmate what the time was, what do you think might have been a solution for you in the future? And again, I don't want to push you into a solution that you think is not right. Some people choose the same solution, but if you're thinking logically about this whole situation, what do you think might have been a better option?
I think a better option would have probably been to just like ask a classmate or a teacher.
Okay.
Then I wouldn't even have to deal with me getting my phone out, and she wouldn't even have told me to put it away in the first place.
Absolutely. And thinking about your past times that you've gotten in a little bit of trouble in the classroom, which led to this, out of school suspension, is that the phone tends to be a situation where the teacher corrects you a lot about that. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right, so thinking about that, how you would ask for the teacher, how do you think you should have asked her for the time if you came across that situation?
I probably should have been like, hey, I can't see the clock. I was just wondering if you could tell me the time so I didn't have to get my phone out.
Okay. Do you think you would just yell it out like that, or do you think you would do something different?
I would probably like raise my hand or wait till work time and then ask her then.
I like that. I think that would be a great solution. So raise your hand, ask the teacher. Again, nice calm voice, no real attitude necessary. Just raise your hand and say, hey, can you give me the time because I can't see the clock, right? So go ahead and write out that solution. I think that's a fantastic solution. Go ahead and write that out.
And again, drawing her to, something that was going to work, the solution that would be the most beneficial to her, and then saying, let's go ahead and write that out so that she has a record of the kind of thinking that she's done.
And again, there's a little bit more shaping that happened there and some incidental teaching on how to get the teacher's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout your time, however long that suspension is, you'll start expanding on different skills and getting focused in on what is really the issue here. What is your skill deficit that doesn't allow you to maintain in the classroom? And the phone is just a starting point, really,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just kind of start getting into it and finding out and start teaching, really
Mm-hmm.
teaching behaviorally.
I was looking there. You could go with facial expression. You could go with posture in the classroom. There's a lot of things I would practice with her over this period of time because she's coming around, but she still has some more things to work on.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you noticed, but some students absolutely do pick the same exact solution. They pick the same exact behavior. I've had that a lot of times with kids that were fighting. What would you do? Well, I'd still punch them out again.
Oh.
But that gives us opportunity to do additional teaching and really gives us just a better framework on where they need supports.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just one tool that's in the book. Everybody that's attending this webinar will have access to a SOTAS worksheet. In addition, I think we're going to post the full video of the SOTAS process on our website, so you'll be able to watch that all the way through as just a framework to start. So our program is just built on teaching, and we want to make sure that behavior teaching and academics happen because those are the two main points that gets kids suspended. And one of the programs that uses the curriculum here at Boys Town is the Metro Intervention Center. They call it the MIC, but it started in 2015 as an extension of the educational services provided on the Omaha campus. And it's integrated into the Boys Town mission by providing an alternative suspension program for 10 school districts in the Omaha community, including Millard Public Schools, Papillion La Vista, Omaha Public Schools, Gretna Public Schools, Springfield Platteview, Elkhorn Public Schools, Bennington, Blair Community Schools, Ralston Public Schools, and Westside Public Schools. And we have a mix of urban, suburban, and rural communities that utilize this program. But we're not saying that you have to have a program outside of your school. You could absolutely have a program inside of your school, but this program that we created here is designed to meet the needs of students who have been short or long-term suspended from their home school, potentially have been expelled, depending on the length of the expulsion, are verified or non-verified for SPED services, and have the need for pro-social skills, maybe included in their behavioral IEP. The districts in need of suspension services are able to place students in the program in two ways. This is how we frame our program. First, districts have the option to purchase guaranteed seats for up to 40 days of suspension throughout the school year. The other option is that we have a drop-in fee for students that maybe have a day or two of suspension. To work within this program, we have 2 special education certified teachers, 2 paras, and a behavior interventionist that deals with behavior. Typically, students are provided services for up to 19 school days. After 20 school days in the state of Nebraska, it's considered an expulsion. So then we have to have further conversations about that. If a student needs to stay past those 20 days, we'll meet with the district to determine placement options for up to 45 days. And within that, we're creating special behavior intervention plans. The majority of the students receive short-term services and stay less than 10 school days, and the Metro Intervention Center has seats for up to 30 kids currently, and I think they're thinking about expanding up to 40 or 50 for the next year. They also have 10 spots for kindergarten to 5th grade program and 20 for the 6th grade and older, and the kinder to 5th grade program is very different, which is...
It should be.
Yeah, it should be, but it's kind of insane that the increase in the number of suspensions of early elementary kids that really haven't fully identified what skills they have yet. So that program is really based on creating behavior plans and giving teachers the ability to work with those students in their school.
When we first started this back in 2009, one of the things we noticed is that the people who were bringing them back and forth every day would ask, now, so what did you do all day? And we were actually building the skills of the administrators and counselors who were escorting the kids to the PASS program, so that kind of did a shift for them, and they were able to handle many more of their own students. And we saw a huge reduction in that group.
And the primary focus of both programs, and as we talked about with the PASS program, is to provide an alternative to traditional suspension practices to reduce suspensions by providing both behavioral and academic supports during the assigned period of the program. And I think that's an important point, too. We don't have just kids in a holding tank. We are actively working on behavior and actively working on academics. The program staff will determine the appropriate behavior and academic needs of the students depending on the reason of placement, and discussions with the school district and discussions with the student. So currently, the Shawnee Younghans and Dr. Butler currently run the program. And we wanted to just have a little bit of a video from those 2 guys to just talk about what are some of the challenges that they face, and what are some of the outcomes that they were looking for in their positive alternatives program. So let's hear from them.
From our perspective, one of the hardest things has been making sure that we have the right people in place to work with kids, because while they're a wide variety of kids, the whole philosophy of the program is what's so important, and knowing that they're always treated respectfully, they're always greeted warmly, that we want them there, making sure we have the right person there with the right attitude, I think, is an obstacle.
I think the biggest obstacle for us is the relationship. You know, those short-term stays, it's the relationship is the key to what we can do in those PS systems. Yeah, and how do you build that in a short amount of time? Okay. Without being too reaffirming. Right. Because that's been the other thing our school districts have said to us, don't make it warm and fuzzy. We don't want them to want to be there. With the short-term stays, we're looking at the student learns one major skill. they might not be able to generalize it completely, but it gives them the starting blocks to then go back to their home school and continue working on that skill.
And as a former public school administrator who is used to a discipline system where we consequent kids but don't necessarily provide any training or teaching that would help them act differently in the future, I think the major outcome is that we're actually teaching skills to avoid future problems.
There are a couple of things that Dr. Butler said that I think are very important. You want to make sure that if you're going to have an alternative suspension program, you absolutely do have to have the right people in place. Oftentimes, school districts will find the biggest, meanest person they can think of, and what we find is that that's not, it does not deter or change student behavior just because I'm an intimidating force and you sit in a room quiet for hours and hours. It's not, there's no skill building there. And I think that the point of being, business casual, not being too affirming, but being kind and being able to build a relationship where you can have a conversation and not a confrontation will serve you better in the future.
Right, and then a person who can also assist with the academics.
Yes.
And give them the confidence that a lot of these kids feel really lost. They don't want to go back to that class because they have how they're going to catch up. So giving them the confidence in the subject matter and being able to provide that assistance as well. It's kind of a partnership. We want somebody who can do both behavioral teaching and some academic support. So that's the ideal person.
And some school districts that we work with say, well, I can't afford to have another teacher to house a room like this. But when you think about all the benefits to how much academic time you will gain and how many dollars you will gain by keeping kids in school more, really it's a no-brainer when you look at later is absolutely longer, and you're looking at the long-term success of these kids, and that's where you're going to find the most bang. So this kind of concludes what we were here to talk about. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions that you have, go ahead and type those in your chat box and chat all participants. We have, 10 minutes or so. We can answer some questions. And also there's a picture of the Positive Alternative Suspension book there on your screen. It's available from the Boys Town Press if you're interested in getting it. Where can I get more information on the Kinder 5th grade model? So Boys Town, as our national training department, has tons of models, school-wide, individual, multi-tiered systems of support, well-managed schools, or positive foundations for elementary students is an absolute great model. If you want to know more about what we do or what we train across the country, you can absolutely look on our website, boystowntraining.org, and you can see tons of information on there. Let's see.
Restorative intervention.
Yep. So do we offer training for PTs and in-school suspension teachers? Absolutely, we do. Our training is for how to process referrals and things like that. It's called administrative intervention. But we also have supports for alternative to suspension programs too. How do you address students who refuse to work in this program?
Well, you stay with them. And I don't think we've actually mentioned that, but you do have a high rate of praise. I think Dr. Butler referred to that, is that you give them the time they need to settle in, try to engage them as people, and be positive, praise any approximations to thank you for coming in and sitting and being quiet. You're making a good choice in doing that. Point out all the good choices they've made just by actually being in your room.
I think another point to that too is that whenever a student is misbehaving or refusing to work, we're going to have a corrective conversation, and we're going to talk to them and have high expectations. On the other side of that, the other thing that we suggest in a program like this is if a student has a 3 or 5 day suspension, however they are on task and doing what they're supposed to be doing, we would highly suggest reducing the amount of suspension and sending them back to class quicker. So there's motivation for them to actually achieve rather than set and be a piece of furniture. But it does happen. So with that being said, whenever students do eventually get out, because they do, we want to make sure that we have plans in place when they do go back to support them both academically and behaviorally. Good question. By academic support, do you mean that during suspension you work on classwork they are missing? Yes, absolutely. So we have blocks of time to work on their core academics, and then blocks of time specifically set out to deal with behavior and social skills. What we find is when students are suspended, they get further and further behind academically, and when they go back to class, they're frustrated, and they end up earning additional referrals and additional suspensions. So what we highly suggest is that you keep up with the academic rigor. You get the schoolwork from, if it's an alternative program outside of the school, then you get the schoolwork from the school. But if you're within the school, then absolutely that schoolwork needs to happen every single day. Good question. Are you using 19-day placements or less in the ISS room? You absolutely could. It would be a little bit difficult to have a student that long, but you could absolutely do it. What I would suggest is looking at your discipline matrix and seeing is the 19 days, is it necessary? A lot of the 19-day suspensions that we run across are kids that have weapons, drugs and alcohol kind of violations. So
it seems like if you had got some other supports in there, are they seeing a counselor for their drug alcohol issues? And if they are, then that should count for something.
Yeah.
So that you put together a package of supports for the student who, that you tailor to that student's needs, and it doesn't have to be a sentence of 19 days.
Absolutely.
In an ISS.
Absolutely. I'd be curious about the curriculum to reteach these desired skills. Besides using plan teaching or voice tone skills, how do we evaluate or provide meaningful instructions? What do you use? So when we think about the specific skills or strategies that we're using in the class or in a suspension room or in a classroom, the tools we use to evaluate that would be based on our coaching workshop, which takes into account what proactive measures are you using in the class, what's your reinforcement rate, what's your compliance percentage, what types of correction are you using, what's your on-task rates, those specific measures to determine if the curriculum is actually being used. What's the ideal ratio for staff to students? I think we have in high school,
we were saying 5 to 1, but we realized that there's going to be days when the room is a little bit fuller.
Yeah, so at the high school level, so 8th grade to senior year, you can have more students in there that can work a little bit more independently. So maybe 6, 8, 10 to 1. And then for the elementary level, they're going to need a lot more support. So I would suggest not getting over 4 to 1 for that type of environment. Great question. How do we access the training for in-school suspension teachers? My normal stay for students is 1 to 3 days for 9 to 12th graders. Okay. So there's a couple different ways that you can access training for these students. There will be a slide here at the end of our workshop, and you can contact us by phone. You can look at our website to see what training options are available. We train across the country, so we could come to your site, or we also have on-campus workshops. If you're anywhere near Omaha, Nebraska, we have workshops here on campus for that specific group. Does the book include information for teachers training in the referral process? We touch on it, but we don't necessarily go into it fully. So that's a great point. What this book really entails is what strategies and activities you can utilize after a student has been suspended. But you could absolutely use a lot of the strategies and also tools that are in here during that referral process. Great question. So much of this begins with teacher relationship with kids. Do you offer anything for whole faculties? Yes, we absolutely do. One of our primary school-wide interventions or trainings is called Well-Managed Schools, and it provides a multi-tiered system of support for students for school-wide interventions at the universal level, interventions at the secondary, and interventions at the tertiary level to provide a common language amongst schools with our social skills curriculum as the foundation. And again, if you would like more information about that, that is on our website also, but we do implement that across the country.
Oh, let's see.
Are the hours commensurate with their campus? I'm not sure I understand that question. What is done to help students with the transition back to their home school? Now, that's a great question.
And there's another one down there or under it about restorative practices.
Okay.
See.
So students returning back to their home school, if you have an external program, students returning back to their home school, that conversation happens day one with administration. If it's a student that's been suspended for an extended period of time, like less than 19 days, then we often have the school administration come and see them. We also have ongoing discussions about what supports are we going to set in place for students when they go back. For all of our students that come into our program, we write behavior plans for them to go back into and provide specific strategies for them to achieve. At times, we also talk to parents to figure out what specific strategies we want to make sure that this student is held accountable for the consequence that they earned, but also provide supports necessary that they don't earn suspensions again. Mm-hmm. And I think some of those preventive measures that are hugely important. So ongoing conversations, behavior plans, and anything else.
Yes, they'll practice apologies.
Oh, absolutely.
They practice showing appreciation as well. So they're going to thank the people that worked with them and help them problem solve. But they're also going to either if it's like an uncomfortable situation with a peer, they'll do written apologies to that peer. But we have them practice before they leave apologies to their administrators, to the teacher, any teachers that were involved, so that they are well prepared and rehearsed to go back there and make amends. And it's because an apology is a social skill that they'll need in their lives, because everybody messes up and they need to use an apology from time to time. It also gives them a fresh start with that teacher and with that administrator, that they're willing to give them another chance if they do a nice job with their apologies. So we spend the last part of their past experience practicing and doing some things to make amends.
And there was a question about restorative practices also. I absolutely think that this would be a great program to combine with restorative practices whenever you're teaching skills in a group setting. So having peace circles or even discussions about behavior and going back and forth with the students to talk about some restorative practices, absolutely, that is something that could be utilized within this. If the student is suspended for more than a day, after you use the SOTUS process, do you work on additional social skills training by scenarios in conjunction with academic work? How much and how often do you spend on the social skills training? So what we typically do is we have 40 minutes of academics, a 5-minute break, and then we usually have about 10 to 20 minutes of social skills instructions 3 to 4 times a day, somewhere around there. If theoretically you have taught all teachers on campus how to teach social skills, do you have some form of report card or acknowledgement of what the student has learned, and are for teachers getting them back to carry over those skills, an assessment tool for needs of reteaching?
And yes, we do. Yes, there's a form, and there's a form that the past coordinator fills out that talks about what skills were taught and how far they got in their assignments. And there's a way to document that the student was checked on at this particular time, and this is what they were working on at the time, so that there's for the supervisor of the PASS facilitator, there's lots of documentation that is valuable for the teachers to have.
So there's a behavior card that they would have all day long, but there's also a synopsis of what we talked about and what we worked on, and that report would be the follow-up. Do students attend PASS for the same hours as their home school?
It's a little shorter. They usually come a little later. They leave a little earlier, and that's just to avoid access to the large group of their peers. So they're not hanging out before school and then report to the PASS room and then leaving school with all their friends. So we make it look a little bit different for them, just to be able to provide that contrast.
Yeah, I think that contrast is important. Absolutely. Can you do this with more than one student in a room? Yes, absolutely, and you often will. So we talked about ratios a little bit earlier. Really, you want to maintain a ratio that is manageable, and that's going to be based on what types of needs your student have, what age groups they are, and their skill deficit. But yes, you can do this with more than one student in a room. Then facilitate the contrast, we were recommending for a uniform. I don't think you would necessarily recommend a uniform for the students to wear. But again, that
we're not into shaming or making them look different.
Yeah, I mean, I see where that might be at, but we don't want to set up a situation where it's power and control. Again, we want to make sure that we create an environment where teaching can happen, and the student is the right mindset for that. These are amazing questions, and I think that was our last one. So if you have further questions, what's that email address again? You can email askthetrainer@boystown.org, and we will be happy to get back to you with any further questions you have after you process this a little bit. We really appreciate everyone who attended today, and we are really excited for the program and for the book and the possibility of working with many of you out there if you're interested in our other trainings. And we'd love to hear from you about the book if you like it or have suggestions for what we could have done better. Yeah, and we'll always up for rewrite. So if you have any additional questions about trainings or any of our other models that we implement, you can call John McGuire. He's part of our sales staff. His number's there, or you can email training@boystown.org. The information on the kinder to fifth grade model, you can absolutely get that from our website. And we have that the kinder to fifth grade model is called it's called Positive Foundations for Elementary Students, and you can get that information from our website. Will the PowerPoint be available to download? Unfortunately, it will not be available to download, but after this webinar, you'll have access to SOTAs and also the video of the SOTAs. But the webinar will be recorded, so you could absolutely access it again if you wanted to see the PowerPoint again. So thank you so much, and Kathy and I signing off. Goodbye. Goodbye.